melanated minds with the crown restored. Asiatic truth that we cannot ignore. Honor to noble Drew Ali, we rise. Nationality reclaimed, open your eyes. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, the spark. No more strangers walking in the dark. Research first, let the facts ignite. Real Morse talk every week, truth over hype. This is knowledge, this is heritage, this is consciousness. Welcome to Real Morse Talk with your hostess, Prime Minister Duria Bey. Hey. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Shadow hour. 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 You are now tuned into Real Morse Talk. Melanated glow, crown back on the throne. Asiatic spirit, yes, we finally home. Honor noble Drew Ali, we proclaim. Nationality restored, we reclaim the name. Yeah. Love, truth, peace, let it spark that fire. Freedom, justice, lifting hearts higher. No more strangers, we know our part. Real Morse Talk, truth from the heart. Real Morse Talk, truth from the heart. Real Morse Talk, that's right. Shadow hour. Shadow hour. Shadow hour. That's it. Rise up, that's it, rise up. This is heritage. That's it, rise up. That's your consciousness. That's it, rise up. That's your heritage. That's it, rise up. Never have a name. That's it, rise up. This is heritage. This is consciousness with your hostess, Prime Minister Duria Bey.
All right, everyone. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Morse Talk. We are on episode 6. So I'm so excited to have you here with me today on Real Morse Talk. I am your hostess. I am Prime Minister, National Grand Sheikh Bay. And I'm just so excited. We're in the month of March. When we know that the month of March, especially the 21st, is actually the new year when everything starts to come back to life in March. And so I'm just really excited about that. It's also the same month that I was born in. The 26th of March is my actual born date. It's the date that my mother gave birth to me. So I'm excited about the month of March. So I want to jump right into it. I trust you all enjoyed the intro. I want to jump right into the topics today because we have a lot to cover today. And I wanted to also go over a few comments that were given. I do want to say this Real Morse Talk that I have episode is about the Prophet Noble Drawley. It's about more science. It's about not because of course every episode does not going to be filled with like Noble Drawley, but all the works that he did, all the wonderful things that he brought to us to give us the knowledge and information to move forward with things. And so this is what Real Morse Talk is, and says, why is it Real Morse Talk? Because I'm real. The Moors that come here are real, and we're talking. Real Moors Talk. We're talking about things that as Moors we should talk about. And I just wanted to say that when people are making comments, since I'm going to get into some of that today, but I did want to start that off with this, is that some when you're making comments, it's all right to comment. Either you like something or you do not like it. You like it or you do not like it, and you can voice your opinion. I agree or disagree with you. I may not like something that you say, or I do not agree with what you say, or whatever. But leaving negative comments about the individuals that are speaking or talking is a negative. And so, what I came to the conclusion after vibrating on that is that what's happening is someone came to your page or something that you were doing and left a negative comment to you. And so now you want to come on someone else's page and leave a negative comment to them. Hurt people. And that's really unfortunate that that happens because you do not have to say negative things when you come to someone's broadcast or podcast. You don't have to leave a negative something about the individual. So I'll give you an example. One of the comments, a sister came on and she didn't agree with something, and then she said, "You're just as bad as everyone else," or something like that. You don't even know me from a can of paint, so you cannot say I'm as bad as everyone else because that's an unfair statement. But the bottom line is, if you say, "Well, I don't agree with this," or give me your opinion on what I said, then I can value that. When you come here and make negative comments about individuals, I would never go to anyone's page, broadcast, Facebook, any of those things, and I would never make a negative comment about something that someone else said. Either I agree or disagree. And so I just, after vibrating on it, I came to the conclusion that hurt people. Someone obviously probably went to her page and said something hurtful to her. So now she had to come and say something hurtful to me, which my feelings are not hurt. I take this as a personal way as well as impersonal for me. But comments like that, I'm just bringing it to the attention to let you all know. My son did say, "Mother, there's trolls out there." And I had to find out what that all meant. Trolls. People want to get on your page and say negative things. A brother came on and said something very, very negative about my hair, which is covered. You can't even see my hair. So I'm just saying that when we want to make a comment about something, make a comment, but you do not have to attack the individual that is speaking. That's not necessary. If you do not agree with what I'm saying, I value that. We all have an opinion. I said that in my very first episode. We all have an opinion. Your opinion is no proof of the truth, but you have the right to an opinion, and I can value that. But attacks personally on me is ridiculous. You do not have to personally attack me, and that's what's happening when people are making comments. Instead of making a comment and move forward, they're saying something negative, and that's only lower vibrations. So I just wanted to share that with you all today because it was on my heart to share that with people that, this is not the platform to do this in. You don't have to attack anyone personally if you do not agree with something that they're saying. When I'm speaking, I'm talking in general. But if you feel like you're personally attacked, then, I have to apologize for that. But I'm speaking in general terms when I'm saying things. I'm not pointing out one individual. But if you actually go to someone's page and make a comment on their page, then that's personally attacking them when it's negative. You do not have to say anything negative about another individual. All right. So let's get right into it. So let me just go over today what I'm going over on Real Morse Talk. I'm so organized today. I'm really excited that I'm more organized today. And so tonight we will continue our mission of discussing history, identity, nationality, and historical records using research and documentation rather than speculation. All right. And so that's important to me, that when I'm giving you the information that I'm giving you, that you're able to verify what I'm saying. So everyone get out your paper and pencils, or papers and pens, and let's get ready to take some notes today on Real Morse Talk. All right. So today, Real Morse Talk is a space for learning, research, and respectful dialogue. And that's what I wanted to say. I can respect if you have a dialogue that you want to share with me. And someone asked me through email about having guests. And I think I did say that in the very first broadcast, that I will invite guests on. If people want to come on and talk about more science, talk about the prophet, talk about the things that we need to do for uplifting fallen humanity, then I welcome them. This is a platform for truth and communication and fun and information. That's what this platform is for. I also did want to say too, on this particular platform, that I was asked about a date that I would like to put out there for everyone to get together in unison. And so I'm going to say it now, and then I'll say it again and a little later in the broadcast. So what if you're interested in coming together in unity, then you could send an email to Real Morse Talk. And let me just, one of these has the email on it. Let me see if it's this one. No, let me go to the one that has the email. One of these has the email on here. Oh, there it is. realmorsetalk@yahoo.com is right in front of my face. So realmorsetalk@yahoo.com. And what you would put on that particular one, realmorsetalk@yahoo.com, and bring it back up. What you would do is in the email, put Unity Summit 2026. That would be the title, Unity Summit 2026. So that way I know you're speaking in reference to getting together for the unit summit that we spoke about, the unity. If you're interested in the cooking, because people did email me about the cooking, if you're interested in the cooking segment, then you would do the same email, realmorsetalk@yahoo.com, and put cooking segment. And so that way I can identify which emails or what email. So all you have to do is just identify the emails. And I'm so excited. Let me just tell you that some of you all are interested in what I'm speaking about, the Unity Summit, and about the cooking, because I love to cook. So, and I love to gather with my own people. So I'm going to restate it again later on in the broadcast, but I wanted to make sure that I had it while I was still up here. All right. So we're going to always encourage listeners to research, verify sources, study historical documents, and compare information from multiple archives. Because what I do when I'm doing my research is I have different means of information that you could go to and look it into for yourself. Because when you're doing when you're historically looking up information, or you're trying to relate something to someone, you want to make sure that they're able to verify the sources of which it came from. And so, trustfully, in this particular podcast, I'm making sure that I do that. And if there's at any time that you feel as though I am not clear about something, please do not hesitate to put it in the chat, or you can go ahead and email me at realmorsetalk@yahoo.com. All right. So tonight's theme, separating historical evidence from modern assumptions. We will address the Ethiopian Bible discussion, the origins of certain religious traditions, historical interpretations of scripture, identity and historical narratives. And I'm going to respond to several viewers' comments on what they spoke about. So it's going to be tied into the comments that were spoke about. Some people had informational comments that they made, and I guess they needed more resource information. So I made sure that I was prepared to do that with you all today. All right. But first, I want to give most honors to our Prophet Noble Jali, much high honors to Prophet Noble Jali, honors to the Most High, God whom I choose to call Allah, allowing for Allah to waken me up today, this rising, in my right frame of mind with my good common sense, life, health, and thought of consciousness to be on this road, because sometimes it's rough and sometimes it's smooth on this road. And I know you all can identify with that. All right, so I want to start off with the very first comment that I'm going to address today. So one of the viewers' questions was, if the Ethiopian Bible is authentic, why are the biggest worshipers of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed figure referred to as Jesus? And I wanted to answer that question because we know that in what they call Ethiopia, that there is a lot of worship Christian. They're really big on Christianity. They even have a great big figure of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. It's like a great big old white statue that they have over there in that land. And I want to just go over, touch some of that today. So I'm going to put these peepers on and go over it. All right, the first thing we must do is separate the three different issues here. The Ethiopian Bible tradition, European artistic depictions, and modern church imagery, because that's what you see. Okay, when you're seeing that, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that blonde hair, blue eye, which came much, much later, but that is what you're seeing. All right. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tawido is pronounced Tawihido or Tawido church possesses one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world. Their scripture canon includes texts preserved in the Gazi language and ancient Semitic languages of Ethiopia. So the language that it's actually in is a language that would have to be translated. So that's why it's considered one of the oldest. Now, I did find some Ethiopian Bibles that were $31. Someone sent me a link and saying that they found them. And so I did check it, and they're like $31. I think that was the cheapest one, $31. Now, I did see a Ethiopian Bible on Tumu, because somehow when you are looking for something or saying something, all these sites, for some reason, all these sites can, verify, that you did, because they somehow know that that's what you did. And so I think it was a little bit cheaper, but I don't know if it's authentic. That's the thing about the Bibles. You want to make sure that the one you get is authentic Ethiopian Bible. All right. So you might find someone sell. And of course, I wasn't able to open it. So I'm not sure if it was an authentic one, but it was $31 for that particular one. All right. So I just wanted to bring that to you all attention. I'm trying to fix this because I don't want this ring light is in my glasses. All right. So that's what we want to know about that. Okay. So let's do the first fact. The first fact is Christianity entered Ethiopia in the 4th century CE. So a lot of people, when you say CE, BCE, CE, so when the CE era, okay, during the region of King Ezan of Aksum or Aksum, you can depend on the pronunciation. And you can verify that from the Ezan stone inscriptions and the Ethiopian church historical records. So that's the first fact. The second fact is European Renaissance art later produced the widely circulated blonde hair, blue eyed depictions. I want to say that again. European Renaissance art later produced the widely circulated blonde hair, blue eyed depictions. Those images emerged primarily in European paintings during the 13th to 16th centuries. So now we're talking about Christianity coming to Ethiopia in the 4th century. Stay with me. But the blonde hair, blue eyed depiction did not come into that particular area until the 13th and 16th centuries. So that's when that whole era of it changed. The sources to verify is Art History Archives, the Metropolitan Museum of Art database, and European Renaissance religious paintings. So I'm just giving you my sources if you want to look up where my information came from. So I just want to make sure that we cover these comments today first, because we don't run from anything here at Real Morse Talk. All right, we actually address it. Fact 3. Traditional European religious art actually depicted biblical figures with Asiatic African features and dark skin tones. So the traditional Ethiopian, when someone mentioned that the Ethiopians had the blonde hair, blue eye figure, which they do now today, but the original figures were not blonde hair, blue eye. Remember, I said that they didn't come in until the 13th century. So therefore, the 4th century is when Christianity entered into that landmass. So there was no depiction of a blonde hair, blue eyed man at that particular time. So stay with me. Viewers can verify this in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church iconography. So it's called iconography, and manuscripts such as Gurmaya Gospels. These manuscripts date to approximately the 5th to 6th centuries. So, and this is doing research. You would go through the information and research just for those who are interested, but I have to give it to you. So my conclusion for the first comment is, so the issue is not the authenticity of the European scripture, but rather the global spread of European religious art imagery during colonial periods. Those are two different historical developments. So Christianity coming into Ethiopia, which is Ethiopia, Abyssinia, whichever you call it, went in there in the 4th century. The European depictions came much later. All right. So this is when colonial occupiers took over, colonialism took over. The people started practicing the colonialism because they were, subservient in their own land. So, whatever the European brought over to us, this is what we wind up doing and taking that in. But originally, those figures were not what the Ethiopians celebrated at all. And historically, they should go back and research for themselves to see that they never honored any blonde hair, blue eyed individual, because they weren't even in existence at the time when Christianity first invaded that particular area. All right. So I trust I was clear. And if not, people can, make sure that they comment on what I'm saying, or, like I said, I have so much information and books and things that I've written. So this is information that someone did ask about that, and they wanted to know, because of course today in Ethiopia, they do have the blonde hair, blue eye figure. They have a great big statue of a European looking, what they call Jesus. And then we already know, which I'm going to address today, that his name was never Jesus, because someone really tried to run me through the coals about that. And I will definitely comment on that. All right. So the second comment, the viewer needed assistance with paperwork and communication and response. So someone came on and said that you had put in paperwork, and I'm not sure who you put it in with, but you said you never got a response. So here at Real Morse Talk, you can go ahead and send me the information that you're talking about at realmorsetalk@yahoo.com. You also can email me at the national headquarters email as morsenationalheadquarters@gmail.com. All right, so you can contact me those two ways, and I can see if I can assist you in getting what you're talking about, because I'm not sure who you went through to get your paperwork done. But all you have to do is just reach out to me, and I will give me your information. Now, you did leave, I think there was the email that you had in the comments, but I'm not sure if that's the email I should use to reach out to you. If it is, and you see this broadcast again, please do so, and I will reach out to see if I can assist you. That was the second comment. Just a few comments that I'm addressing today. The third comment was, you are still calling the character invented by Rome. Our ancestors never heard of the name until slavery. So someone was saying that I'm still, by calling him Yahshua, that I'm still just as bad as the people who call him Jesus when there's an untruth to that. So let me go into that. The historical figure described in early Christian writings later institutionalized interpretations. The evolving of language and naming. Fact one, the language development. So we're going to go into that. Fact one. The name Jesus is an English translation that has no real association with the true identity of Yahshua. And I speak about that all the time. That name has there is no one historically except for the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man that the Nicene Council calls Jesus, and others call him Jesus because they're trying to say that the English translation translates to Jesus and it does not, but that's what they're saying. And so that is what people call him today. I do not disrespect, because if you're saying Jesus, you're talking about the blonde-haired, blue-eyed figure that they put on the wall for you to hang up on your walls. Okay, so that's who Jesus is. All right. All right, so let me go to the linguistic part of this. So in the Hebrew Aramaic form is Joshua. Okay. And if you were to translate Joshua today, it would be Yahshua or Joshua with the J now, because remember there was no J back in ancient time. So the J replaced the Y. It still doesn't interpret that to the whole Jesus, but let me break it down to you of how they figured they got to this. So the Hebrew Aramaic form of Yahshua, then you have the Greek translation is Issuus. So they use the I and it's called Issuus or Issuus. That's how the so-called Greek translation of it was. And then from Latin form, it went to Isos. And then, in the Arabic language, we know Isa, we call Isa, but Isa does not translate to Jesus. And then the English form came into where they said, oh, we're going to just put the J on it. We're just going to call him Jesus, and we're going to have everyone conform to calling him Jesus. Don't matter, that's not his name or no association to the man that if you're ill or sick, which I don't know why you would call on someone other than the creator, but if you're ill or sick and you want to reach out to this individual, well, no one's going to answer you because that's not their name. And I did explain that in the very first episode, that if I change my name and I had an older name, let's say Imani is my appellation now, but before my name was I don't know, Mary or something like that, which we know Mary is really Mariam, but just to say that. And so I know that I changed my name, then that would mean that if someone called me by the name I corrected it from, I would still probably answer, because they probably don't realize that I corrected my status. I would answer them and then explain my correction to that. So that would be me, because I made the decision to change it. Or say my parents woke up and they realized that they gave me the wrong appellation or the wrong name. And just say that they gave that to me and they realized, oh, I need to correct my child's status. Then my parents could do that. Of course, now my parents did it, I did it. So we all know I had an old name. Now I have a new name. So I may still answer to the old name until people get used to the new name. But when you have a name that you have never associated with you, it doesn't match. So his name was never Jesus, so he's not going to answer to Jesus. And that's just the bottom line with that. Okay. So the sources to verify the language studies is the Bible language studies, the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church, and the Biblical Greek lexicons. So you can look up in those books and it will tell you how they broke down different translations of the actual name. Fact 2. Early texts. The earliest surviving Christian manuscripts are written in Greek, not Latin. So remember, the Greeks, so-called Greeks, are the ones that would constantly change the words because they had a very hard time pronouncing words that associated with us, so they would change it. So the earliest translations that are found are Greek, then Latin. And I know a lot of people think that it's Latin and then Greek, but it's not. Greek and then Latin. Examples include the Codex Sinaiticus Sinaiticus. It's a Sinaiticus. I broke it down so I can pronounce it correctly. Sinaiticus. And the code Vaticanos. Vaticanos. And those are the old scripts that you can actually look in those code texts. These manuscripts date to the 4th century. Now, remember I said that Christianity entered into Ethiopia during the 4th century. All right, and they can be viewed digitally today through the British libraries and the Vatican Library archives. So if you're writing these things down, I'm trying to speak a little slower because I was asked if you could speak a little slower so we could catch on to what you're saying. Okay. All right, fact 3. The colonial period religion. It also historically documented that European colonial powers used religion as a tool to control in many regions. So a lot of us were controlled by the Europeans because they used Christianity as a control mechanism. All right, and so I want to go. All right, so let me just make sure I finish what I wanted to say there. Okay, language development. I just want to make sure I covered all my facts on that one. All right, that includes missionary expansions during colonial empires, religious enforcement during slavery, which is when we were strangers in our own land. The historical reality is documented in the transatlantic slave trade records, missionary journals, and colonial administrative archives. The conclusion of this particular one is historical text, linguistic evolution, political misuse of religion during colonial periods, and these are 3 different historical subjects. So, covering that comment. Now, I want to go on to the comment because this was one of the comments that I needed to break down so people could stick with me. The passage was used Isaiah 43:10-11. This passage states, "You are my witness, says the Lord." Historically, the book of Isaiah is addressing the nation of Israel during the prophetic period of the Hebrew Bible. The time period approximately the 8th century BCE, and that's before the century. So, a lot of the people say it's before Christ, and that's not what it actually represents. The audience being addressed was the Israelite people within the historical context of ancient Judah. The sources to verify that would be biblical historical scholarship, the Hebrew Bible academic studies. Understanding who the text was originally addressing is important for proper interpretation. Clarifying Isaiah 43:10-11, what is being said and who is it being addressed. First, when we read the ancient text, especially scripture, we must ask 3 responsible research questions. This is the 3 questions that I ask. Who is speaking? When I'm looking in the Piscean records, always. Who is the message directed to? And what historical situation is being addressed? When there's a comment, because people like to throw Bible verses out all the time, and we talking that book that's centuries old, but people like to get down with it, and they like to throw out Bible verses, and they never context of who is being spoken to during that particular time. So I'm breaking that down. So without those 3 questions, then it's very hard to be able to say what was being said. So in Isaiah 43, this is the speaker in Isaiah 43 is supposed to be the Most High. So that's supposed to be Allah talking to Isaiah. That's supposed to be the God of your understanding, the Most High God. It's supposed to be coming through saying these things to Isaiah. Isaiah was a Hebrew prophet who lived approximately 740 to 700 BC during the period of the Kingdom of Judah. You can verify this in historical Bible scholarship, Hebrew Bible academic studies, and the ancient Near Eastern historical research. Okay. Who is being spoken to? The phrase, "You are my witness," is directed to the nation of Israel, meaning the people of Israel as a covenant community. Covenant means contract together. In the context of Isaiah 43, the Most High is addressing the children of Israel, reminding them that they have been chosen to testify about the existence of power of the Most High. In other words, they are being told, you have seen my work in history, therefore you are a witness. This is referring to events such as deliverance traditions, covenant agreements, and the historical narrative of the Israel as a people. What is the passage saying? The passage is being communicated in a declaration of monotheism. The Most High is saying there is only one sovereign divine authority. No other deity created before or after can claim that position. The people of Israel served as a witness of that reality. The emphasis of the passage is recognition of the one creator. So it's not even talking about any prophets, because if that was the case, Isaiah was a prophet. So if you're saying that Isa is fake and not a real prophet, then you're also saying things about Isaiah. So you're saying that you should not be worshiping man anyway. You should be worshiping the Most High, but we give honor to man or honor to our prophets or messengers. So when you're making that statement that you made, saying that they're all fake anyway, and that I am no better than the ones who are calling on Jesus, is an untrue statement, because Isaiah is supposed to be the prophet that the Most High is speaking to. And the true Isa, the one that we're looking at, or Yahshua, is a prophet as well. Okay, so, all right. It's important to understand that the passage is not addressing modern debates about names or traditions. It's also not written to modern religious denominations, modern political movements, or modern internet debates. It was originally addressing ancient Israel in the historical setting that it was stated. And why does this content matter? Ancient texts must be understood within their language, their culture, and their historical moment when this was being said to him. When verses are removed from context, people often build interpretation that original text was not addressing. Responsible scholarship always studies the audience, the historical setting, and the language used. Okay. The passage is affirming that belief that Most High alone holds ultimate authority and power. The people of Israel are described as witnesses to the truth that based on that historical experience. Understanding scripture responsibility requires context research and historical awareness, not assumptions. So when you sent that, you were making an assumption without your full facts, and what you were doing is because that is a prophet too. Isaiah was supposed to be a prophet that Allah spoke to, just like the Isa or Yahshua, as you all like. Yahshua was, I call him Emmanuel, Isa, just like that's supposed to be that Allah spoke through Isa. The same thing with Isaiah and other prophets too. Moses, whose real true identification is Musa. So when you're speaking about those and throwing out Bible verses, you should know the contents of the verses in which you're throwing out to stand on your claim. So you cannot say that if you're saying that Isa never existed and he's fake, then you're saying all the prophets. And so then you're saying, well, who wrote the Piscean record and who was being talked to? Because all of these people are supposed to be prophets. But this is why Prophet Noble Drew Ali told us to stay out of the Piscean record, which means the Piscean record is the Holy Bible, the people that they call the Holy Bible, the Bible. The correct term for that is the Piscean record, but that's what people call it. They call it the Bible. And so when I'm speaking about that, so whenever you're throwing out verses from the Bible, please know the historical content in which you're throwing them out. So that way the information could be more verified and validated, because what you threw out makes no sense. Because then we're saying that there's no prophet at all in that time. And then, a prophet is what? I could be considered prophetic. A prophet is one who's able to what? Tell us what our future events hold. Messengers carry messages to the four corners of the world. They carry messages to everyone, enlightening us of what's going on. All right, so everyone has their jobs that they're doing. So if you're saying that they were all fake and fiction, how do you throw out a Bible verse to me when Isaiah was also considered a prophet, and that's who the Most High was supposed to be speaking to? Because he had the Most High, and I think you referenced him as a he. We know the Most High is not a he, but the Most High speaking out would have to be addressing someone. So who would the Most High be addressing in that incident? So I wanted to just go over that. All right. So I wanted to go over that. And so then I want to go back to the question of the name Jesus, okay, because that still came up again. And I did go over the translations of it. But what happened in the translations of it, it says that the dominant languages that are the languages that were more dominant are the ones that people actually took on historically. All right. And so in ancient Semitic culture, names were not only identifiers, but often carried meanings and cultural content. So it's very important to call the names correctly or appellations. The name Yahshua is related to a Hebrew root meaning salvation or to rescue. All right. And you did not say the Hebronic, you said Hebrew, Roman, I think you said, or something to that effect. But however, the Hebronic language we know is a authentic language. Okay. And so, however, historically speaking, the name given at birth would have been the name recognized with the individual's linguistic environment. So during that time, they named the children according to the environment. And of course, like most mothers do, we name our children according to how we think is going to be in their lives. Like I named my son Shamsuddin, which means that it is one that the faith of the sun, and also one who's going to be Khatib, the lecturer. So he is very powerful name for my son, because I look like my son is looking at both his parents, he maybe be a historical leader. So a powerful name like Shamsuddin, and Shamsuddin was a traveling Sufa. Right, he was one of the ones that were there traveling with Muhammad. So Shamsuddin is very, very, in our historical content, very important in that historical content, leader, those type things. So Shamsuddin is important. So when you give your children names, my daughter Takisha is Swahili, which it came from the Swahili language, which means the beautiful one. So I wanted to name her. And then Sakara is considered from that sacred knowledge of the valley. And so these are names that you give your children, because when you're giving them these names to your children. Now, listen, when our parents were giving us these Roman names or European occupiers' names, they went by, I guess, the way the colonialism told us what the words meant. So they went into that, and that's what they named us. But that doesn't make those names correct or give those names any real true power, because they don't associate with who you are, the melon. The names do not even agree with the melon of who you are. So when people look at you, they can tell who you are and identify who you are by the power of your name. All right. And European occupiers didn't see that. They took a lot of our names and changed them over. Like I just wrote a story for my students about the name Rebecca, because a lot of times my mother's mother had to fix her name. And so it was kind of on that story, because when my mother's mother named my mother Rebecca, she spelled it Rebekah. And they told her that it was a misspelling of the name, because colonial occupiers changed it to Rebecca. That's what they changed it to. So my grandmother at that time felt like she was forced to change the spelling of her own child's name to fit their narrative. So that's what I'm telling you. Some names were taken from us and they changed the names. All right. They did the same thing to the story of Pocahontas. When Pocahontas' name was spelled exactly how Rebecca is supposed to be spelled. And they changed the spelling of her name to the colonial spelling of her name, because they said she was now an American, wasn't even American at the time. She was one of them. And so they changed her name to fit their narrative. And so that's what I'm saying. A lot of times, if you feel like you have a powerful name, but your name may have been changed to a European spelling, and you can identify and trace that back, then you can fix that. But most of the time, the names that we're given today, that a lot of us are still given, are those colonial occupier names, and they have no substance to us. So we do not want those names. All right. So I trust I'm not losing anyone. All right. So, all right. So now we're going to talk about the title Emmanuel, because Emmanuel means enlightened one. And this one is Emmanuel is God is with us. And so the title that was given to him in Isaiah, and this is the same story in Isaiah, the context of the book of Isaiah, this phrase was to really use it as a symbolic sign to divine presence with the people. So calling him Emmanuel, which I did speak about, but that was not talked about. Calling him Emmanuel is better than calling him Jesus, because Emmanuel is a title that was given to him by his mother, the people. Emmanuel, God with us. Okay, and the sources you could use to verify that are the Hebrew Bible scholarship, the ancient Near Eastern historical studies, and the academic biblical commentaries. So these are information of where this information came from. All right. Okay. So now I want to go into the next thing I want to talk about is addressing about suffering. Someone mentioned that how, the reason that their mother, they use the name Jesus because their mother talked about the suffering and things that Yeshua did on the cross. And so a lot of times people resonate with these narratives of oppression, prosecution, and struggle for justice. So when people are saying that, well, we call him Jesus because Jesus died on the cross, the first thing I would say to you is if you're wearing a cross around your neck and you have the figure hanging around your neck in the representation of death, that's not honoring someone. That's really degrading to have death hanging around your neck, because you're saying that you approve of the actual crucifixion of the individual, and they deserve that, and they did not deserve that to be treated in that particular manner. So when we're talking about ancient times back then, it wasn't just Isa that suffered on the cross. It wasn't just Isa, it was others that also were crucified that way. And it was a cruel way to end someone's life. Okay. So, and also we know that if you know the true story, when they took him down off the cross, he was not dead. Okay. We know that he did not rise on the third day. We know that he was in a bad state. So they sent for frankincense and myrrh. You do not need frankincense and myrrh for someone who's past form. So in that particular tomb that they claim that Isa was in is where the healing process took place. So you might want to say he was in a semi-coma, maybe a coma state like we know comas today, but he certainly was not dead. So he didn't rise from the dead on the third day. That's just not, death is death. He didn't rise on the third day, but his condition improved on the third day, where he was able to get up on the third day or so. So I wanted to try to go over some of this information. Okay. All right. And then we want to go to the historical records here. And I want to make sure that people understand that when we're talking about anything on this particular podcast, we're talking about information that's being helpful. And all of this is helpful back to more science, because a lot of people want to understand why you don't go into the churches and why we do not really do the Piscean record, but that's called the Bible. But a lot of people are Moriscos. And what do I mean by that? Moors that practice Christianity. And there's no insult on you if that's you ain't more practicing Christianity, but that's what you're called, a Morisco. Moors who practice Islamic faith are Muslims. So you have your Moriscos, who are Moors who practice Christianity, and then you have your ones who practice the Mohammedan religion, which I'm considered one of those. I'm not a Morisco. I do not practice Christianity in the least bit. So for someone to try to identify me as a Christian is a false statement, because that's not my life. That's not who I am. All right. Okay. I'm just going over my notes, making sure I got through everything that I wanted to talk to y'all about. Because if you make a comment on the line, I'm going to address some of the comments. Some of them are so ridiculous, I'm not going to address the insults and things like that. But some of these are very important information, because if you have a question about something, then someone else may have a question about it too. All right. And so it's really important for me to make sure I address the questions that do come across. That's what this podcast is for. All right. So I think I covered all the comments. I took 4 comments and I covered those 4 comments. All right. And I'm really excited that I was able to do that. And it makes me feel good to trustfully, I broke it down to where it's understood. And if not, I'll read the comments of people who say I did not break it down or whatever. And then I would definitely go back and see if I can clarify it a little bit more. All right. All right, Morris. I'm just so excited to be here with you all today and going over this information. All right. So the next thing, so tonight's thing, so that I addressed the Ethiopian Bible, I addressed the origins of the religious tradition. So, and I also wanted to talk about the NAACP again, because I'm changing because I wanted to do more research. Someone said about the NAACP. So what I did, I kept telling you all, I'm going to bring you the information on the NAACP, but I actually did go ahead and get it for you. So I'm going to go over that with you all today. Let me see where I put that at. Because remember, I talked about the NAACP being an organization that a lot of people, that the so-called Jews, all right, the so-called Jews, they actually started the NAACP. So let me go into that. So let me go to the names of the people. So the people that assisted with the NAACP. Okay, so the first thing was the NAACP was considered a multiracial coalition to reform responding to racial violence and discrimination in the early 20th century. Remember, I said that they did do a lot of work, but we were not in control of the NAACP. And strategy from the beginning focused on legal challenges in the courts, public education and journalism, national advocacy for civil rights. Sources you can cite for that would be the Library of Congress and the NAACP historical records. Now, the people about the NAACP, I'm going to give the names of those who collaborated with the I think it was like 3 or 4 men that were Jewish. So Ida B. Wells, the journalist and anti-lynching activist who participated in early organization of the NAACP. William English Waldney, reformed journalist who helped call the creation of the organization. All right. Then we had the Jewish reformers who participated were Henry Moskowitz or Moskowitz, social reformer who participated. Rabbi I want to say his name is Emil J. Hurst, who was a religious leader for the civil rights advocacy. Lillian Wall, social worker. Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, progressive rabbi. And then later, the leadership was held by Joel Eli Spingarn, served as the chairman of the NAACP and helped shape the strategy. Then you have Arthur B. Spingarn, lawyer who served as the president and supported civil rights. Kevin Kaplan served as the NAACP president from 1966 to 1975. All right, and so I want to clarify that with the NAACP, because the NAACP was an organization, as I said, the so-called the Jewish people that I named gave fiat for the NAACP to get started, and the whole purpose of the organization was to help with the rights and the people that actually took over it. For a long time, there was no one in leadership that looked like us in the NAACP. Over recent years, there has been leadership that looked like us, but NAACP needs to correct their status from that National Association to the Advancement of Color People. They need to fix that. And today it's more of a political organization than it is a humanitarian organization. It's more politics than anything else. All right. All right. All right. So I wanted to make sure so trustfully I've covered everything that were in the questions that people were asking me about, because I do want to get into the next portion of our segment. But I just needed to clarify some things, because it's very important to me that if you have a comment about something, that I'm able to go in and assist you with the comment to the best of my knowledge. And then, you can make another comment and that would be fine too. But I just want to make sure that this is a smooth transition. We're getting informative information that you can actually use. I want to go ahead and look at, so we have a few people on there. Islam's in the chat. I want to recognize Celestial Jurisdiction Islam. Miss Jazz 1960, love the intro. Islam. And then there's someone, Halem 17590, Islam, peace and love instead of hate. I know that's right. And then Divine Sarah, excited to be here. Oh, Divine Sarah, it's so good to see you on the call. All right, wonderful. All right, so now I'm going to go into a few things. I want to go into the book, Who Are the Moors? I trust you all can see that. I got a lot of light here. I don't know if I need to dim some of the light so you'll be able to see it. But I wanted to address those, and now I'm going to go into our lesson for the day. So let me turn this light. Let me see. Can you see that better? It actually made me darker, but you can see it better. I'll have to fix that where it's not into my glasses. But I'm coming from this book here. It's called Who Are the Moors? All right. And of course, you know that you can get this book at circle7publishing.com. We can make sure that you can see that there. You can get it from circle7publishing.com. All right. So I want to go into this book a little bit today. And I wanted to go to where it says page 3. Who are the Moors? All right, and as I stated before, in the very beginning of the book, you'll see that there's a picture of President. Let me take this down so you all can actually see it. At the time Obama was in office and his wife, and they're walking through, you have the Moorish flag held up, and on the other side, it was the American flag too, but I didn't want that in my booklet, so I cropped the picture out. Okay. Just so you all know. Okay. So I do want to go ahead and read the purpose of this particular booklet. It says this booklet is for the educational purposes only. It is designed to assist the reader in understanding who the Moors are today and who they were in the past. It also attempts to explore the importance of knowing one's birthrights, ancestral lineage or heritage, and therefore one's civic orientation amongst a family of nations. The question of race. Those who claim their race as either Black, Negro, colored, Ethiopian, African American, or other have been programmed to think these labels are races. A simple but factual historical reference will help to dispel these untruths, which is that none of these are a race. The only true race is the human race. And we went over that in a few other episodes. So the only true race is the human race. Okay. People who use any of the above labels have no idea of their social status and therefore do not know they have a nationality. Every nation on this earth teaches its people their true heritage and ensures an education in civics to its national citizens. Civics is defined as of or pertaining to citizenship. They are taught to pass the knowledge of their familiar lineage down to their children and their children's children. This mechanism of self-preservation is a right given by the Creator and a divine responsibility of every species of this earth. When a people lose their nationality, they lose their birthright to the land, to their ancestors, because they know not from where they came. Thus, they are unaware of their inheritance and true political and social status. This begs the question, how can an entire nation, race of people, become lost to their cultural and ancestral heritage? And we talked about that in the prior week, that strangers in your own land. And I did explain that, what they did is, as we had children, and I'll just for repeat, just for those who may not have been here, whenever we had children, what happened was the children were taken away from their parents. And when they were taken away from their parents, they were moved somewhere else. So even if you were on the same plantation, you could be over there on the other side, or you could have someone from another plantation take the child, right? So say if the Johnsons had the mother, and now they named her, I don't know, Mary Johnson, let's just say. And now the child should have been born to the mother, and because she was using the slave term Johnson at the time, would have been Johnson. But say that the Jefferson clan took the child. Now that child may have been, I don't know, Anthony Jefferson. Well, as Anthony Jefferson is growing up, Anthony has no knowledge that he has a mother with the name Johnson. He has no knowledge. So now he's being raised as if he has no family. He's raised on a plantation with people who have no knowledge of themselves. So there's no way for him to self-identify. There's no way for him to get back to his lost heritage, because when he was born, he was taken away. Never had the opportunity for the mother to even talk to the child, or raise the child, or give the child any values or culture. And so this is how you become strangers in your own land. Okay. All right. So wasn't there information passed down from generation to generation and ensure integrity? And so this is what we talked about when I read, so what shall we call him? And what shall we call him? And you'll find that it's also, I put it in this particular book, but you'll also find it in your Moorish literature. What shall we call him? And just to break it down, what shall we call him is speaking about that did not the people from you claim that you brought from somewhere have a name, a nationality, a birthright? Did they not have forefathers or foremothers who they can relate back to? So he said, and then it says, it's talking about the people, you men of letters, talking about people who write and the journalists who write. You should be able to trace this back. So are you mean to tell me that you got a whole race of people over here, as they consider it race, or a whole nation of people over here with no self-knowledge of who they are? And you can't tell them who they are, and so now they're lost. And so they try to make us think that our legacy starts at the time of slavery. Negro, black, and colored starts at the time of enslavement in your own land, because that's what they labeled to call you, to keep you away from making sure you didn't know who you were. So now you have no knowledge of who you are. And so this is how you become strangers in your own land. So now you have no way of teaching your children this information. And what happened on a lot of plantations is a lot of the people that were strangers in their own land started to do code. They started talking to each other in code languages so that the European slave masters couldn't understand. So a lot of so-called Negro spirituals that we hear, those were codes and language, speaking to other tribes in codes and languages, so that this occupier could not make out what they're saying. Okay, so it's very easy to become a stranger in your own land. And listen, we're still walking around today, strangers in your own land. So if I'm telling you, and this is what is very, very difficult for me to understand. When we're talking about historical information and legacy for one another, we're not, a lot of us doesn't seem like we're interested in who we were, because they say that's the past. But if you do not know your past, or how can you have pride? Because listen, The people that you want to mimic yourself after have pride. They have pride in who they are. They raise their children up with pride. They raise their children up with the fiat off of your blood, sweat, and tears. And they do not let go of their history or legacy of who they are. So why are you asked to do that? To let go of who you are. And then your family has no self-awareness of who they are. And so we have to stop that. And we have to stop that today. Right now, we have to make sure that as of today, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening, that you make it up in your mind that you're going to share this information with someone and tell them about who they are. And again, it's not to we're not trying to recruit people. You know, there's not no pyramid scheme or anything like that. We're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is educate or erudite people to their own information. It's very important that we do that, because our children, day by day, as they're being born now, have less and less knowledge of self, less and less knowledge of who they are, and no way to be proudful of self-identification because they were not given it. And so they do not think that it's important. So how do we get back on track to have our children believe and know of the importance of it? It's really, 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 really important that we do that. Okay. So I just wanted to re-go over that. So if you ever get a chance to read again, what shall we call him in the Moorish literature, or in this book? If you have this book, a lot of you all did order this book, Who Are the Moors? You'll find it. Now I wanted to go a little bit into the Moors, and I want to go into foot. Let me take a sip of tea. Foot. I wanted to talk about historical information. All right. And so Foot, the father of the Moors. And when I was young in college, I was so interested in the, and I'm going to read it real quickly in the Holy Quran. This is a stamp of 1937. This is the old Quran stamp, 1937. I know you probably can't see that stamp there. 1937. It was passed down to me from my uncle, 1937. I want to go into where it talks about us as Asiatics in here, and talks about the different tribes and nations of Asiatics. So that's where I really want to go. And then we'll see why it makes sense when I'm talking about foot today. So remember, I love the Prophet Noble Draw League for what I said. So I'm going to come from chapter, and I say Surah, and that's Surah 47 in your Holy Quran. I keep saying Pais in your Holy Quran, Surah 47. If you don't have a Circle 7, you can go to, and I'll put the ads up later. You can go to circle7publishing.com. They're $10 on our site. You can go there and get it. It says, the inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family were second. Then came the word Ethiopian, which means the demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa, the dividing of the land between the Father and the Son. The dominion of Cush, northeast and southeast Africa, and northwest and southwest was his father's dominion of Africa. And we know Africa is a new name, and I did go over that with you all, and I will do a synopsis of review of everything we've gone over so far. In later years, many of their brethren from Asia and the Holy Lands joined them. The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brothers who sojourning from the land of Canaan, seeking new homes. Their dominion and habitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa, across the great Atlantis, even unto the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantic Islands, before the great earthquake which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. The river Nile was dredged and made by the pharaohs of Egypt, and we know Egypt again is a new name for that territory, in order to trade with its surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt in those ancient days for trade, and it extends eastward from the river Nile, westward across the great Atlantic. It was used for trade and transportation. According to all true and divine records of the human race, there is no Negro, black, or colored race attached to the human family, because all the inhabitants of Africa were and are of the human race, descended from the ancient Canaanite nations from the Holy Land of Canaan. Where your ancient forefathers were, you are today without doubt or contradiction. There is no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of their forefathers, and I'm going to say foremothers, unless their powers extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah. The holy and divine laws are from the prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. These laws are to be strictly preserved by the members of all temples of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that they will learn to open their meetings and guide them in according to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. All right, and then it goes into ayah 14. I'll just go ahead and read it. Every subordinate temple of the Grand Major Temple is to form under the covenant of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and create their own laws and customs in conjunction with the laws of the Holy Prophet and the Grand Temple. I, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, was sent by the great God Allah to warn all Asians of America to repent from their sinful ways before that great and awful day which is sure to come. The time has come when every nation must worship under its own vine and fig tree, and every tongue must confess its own. Through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. Ayah 17. That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774. And the word Negro, black, and colored was given to the Asians of America who were of Moorish descent, because they honored not the principles of their mother and father and straight out the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing of. So the prophet is explaining from his portion of understanding why he felt as though we went into slavery because of what we did. That was our consequences that we did. Okay. Now I'm going to go to where it talks about all of the different portions that are Muslims. And you'll see why I went into finding out foot, because this really puzzled me when I was younger, and I wanted to know all of these different people, why foot was not named. So let me see. Let me just go here. I don't like to mark into this older one. Okay, so here we go. So we're talking about chapter 45, the divine origin of the Asiatic nation. And I want to start with ayat 2. It said the key of civilization was and is in the hands of the Asiatic nations, the Moors, who were the ancient Moabites and the founders of the holy city of Mecca. That's us. The Egyptians, who were the Hammatites and a direct descendant of Mizraim. The Arabians, the seed of Hagar, Japanese and Chinese. The Hindus of India, the descendants of the ancient Canaanite, Hittites, and Moabites from the land of Canaan. The Asiatic nations and countries in North, South, and Central America. The Moorish Americans and Mexicans in North America. Brazilians, Argentinians, and Chileans in South America. Colombians, Nicaraguans, and the natives of San Salvador in Central America. All of these are Muslims. The Turks are the true descendants of Hagar, who are the chief protectors of the Islamic creed of Mecca, beginning from Mohammed I, the founder of the United of Islam. Okay, and so that connected the people and nations. And so the interesting thing to me is the people who call themselves Mexicans, call themselves Mexicans, which is a nationality for them, it's connected to a landmass, don't associate themselves with us at all. They don't associate themselves with us as being melanated. Now, some I've talked to do, some of the darker complected ones, some of that I have talked to do, but most of them do not even connect with who we are. So this took me into, well, I hear about Ham and Kush, and I'm hearing about all these others, but I never really hear about foot. So I wanted to find out more for myself about foot, because in the Piscean record, which is called the Holy Bible, I have to keep saying that. People say they need to know what the Piscean record is. The Bible they call holy, that book. Foot is a small portion in there, and it only talks about him in reference to him being a great general. Like, he was notorious, very dangerous. So I could see why he would be left out, because of his legacy and who he is connecting to us. And again, when it comes to us, we are always left out. And so the Prophet Noah Jali did not actually add foot to the information. And for a long time, I couldn't think, like, why didn't the Prophet add foot? Like, we need to know about foot. He's the father of the Moors. We need to know who foot is. And so I found maybe because he did not add it to us, it was for us to do the research for ourselves. So I did. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Foot, the father of the Moors. And again, it's in this particular book. I have the genealogy chart and everything in here. Who are the Moors? Okay. So I'm going to start here. It would take centuries of work to convince and control any entire race of people, blinding them to their own culture, background, history, religion, and birthright. The programming that occurred to displace the Moors was a magnificent defeat. So let's go as far back as my research take me, our illustrious history and legacy, and if I'm able to bring some light on why we are Moors. And the term Moor seems familiar but confusing. There is a reason. Though the term can be found throughout literature, art, and history books, it has been erased away from the true legacy of the original people it belonged to, and now turned into another people's story. Now the writers in modern history want you to believe it started with Shakespeare's play Othello the Moor. Instead, the concept of Moors has been used to describe alternatively the reign of Muslims in Spain, Europeans of African descent, and others for centuries. And I want to stop there for a moment, because this takes me back to us calling ourselves African Americans. I know a lot of Moors are comfortable with that. But what I'm saying, if you want to call yourself African American, you got the right to call yourself whatever you like, misinformation and all. But the thing is this: Europeans are African Americans, right? So if you say Europeans are African American, then you have to say, well, what nation in Africa is that European from? Because they have Europeans in South Africa and other parts of Africa, so they would be the same, African American. So if you're African American, they're African American, everybody's African American. What nation in Africa are you from? Just like American, everyone just can't be she's an American. Okay, but what nation in the so-called America are you from? You have to be able to have some self-identification. And this is one of the things that we're losing in the minds of our children. Because I was going over with my granddaughter, when you pull up now, like some of her people that she are really interested in, some of these artists, and she wanted to know like what their makeup is. For instance, they were looking up, I think, Cardi B, because some people were saying she's, European and Puerto Rican and just a whole bunch of different things. But now when someone pulls up information, it'll say American. American born. It will not tell you like the nationality of the mother and father anymore. Most of the time, it just says American. Well, my thing is American what? You just cannot be just an American. And I hear a lot of people say that. So my son and I was at a Walmart one time, and it was a young brother. He was from Lagos. And so his name was beautiful. I can't recall. I had mentioned it. I asked him if he knew the meaning of his name. I'm pretty good with names and meanings. And he was like, yes. And I said, oh, I said, so, I said, so what nationality? Lagos, because Lagos is a territory, but not so much as the nationality. And so he said, well, my mother and father are Nigerians. I'm American born. Woo! And so I said, so your mother and father are Nigerians, but you have no nationality? Well, I'm first generation American. I said, but in America, what is your nationality? And then I said to him, do not come over here and get lost into thinking that your nationality is not important. Because how do you take people who have a nationality and bring them over here and make them black, Negro, and color? You're stripping your own self. See, today they've done so much damage that they don't have to strip you. You strip yourself. And then when someone like myself or someone else decides that we want to be culturally free and express our nationality, our culture, our way of life, they tell you, well, you're born in America, so you should be practicing America. You want to be African, take that stuff back to Africa, and all kinds of comments that are made. Just ridiculous, silly comments when we know that these United of the States have people from all territories in this United of the States, all territories. So it doesn't even make any sense, or some of the things they will say to attack you. But when you have no self-knowledge, then you're easily influenced. All right. So I was on a term more. I was on a term more. And instead of the concept of Moors has been described alternatively in the reign of Muslims in Spain, Europeans, African descent, and others for centuries. That's what they do. So they try to make it like that we are not Moors. We're not even associated with Moors. So who are we? Because that's the thing. And it says, what shall we call them? You don't want us to take on Moors, which is our true identity, but you don't want us to take on anything else. You want to just label us, and we're supposed to take that, and whichever you say goes. And that's how they put it. Right. So let us start with the father of the Moors, foot. Name meaning bow. Was a deeply melanated man of what is now known of Africa today. Foot named the river Foot in West North Africa. Ptolemy 4:1 mentions the Foot River in Morocco. Wordsmith said in 1872, Foot was still given to a river of Mauritania and all the region around in the 4th century. Since American slaves came mainly from the west coast of Africa and occasionally from Nigeria and the Congo, this indicates that the slaves were descendants of Foot the Moor. And of course, in that ancient book, Moor is spelled M-A-U-R. And I've told people before that it's spelled M-A-U-R or M-U-A-R. Today, modernly, M-O-O-R. Okay, so you'll find a lot of texts or have it spelled the old ancient way, and then we have it modern with the O's. Okay. Historically, in Liberia, we found the coastal tribes of Putas. In Coptic, Libya is known as Fiat. Everyone, Libya, is found in scripture. The Hebrew is foot, but Libya is known as Limium. Foot moved on. So all of those territories are where Foot was in the so-called modern day Africa today. We know Africa is not the original name of the territory, but that's modern name today. And then we can go on to Foot is also identified in Somalian land and Yemen on both sides of the Red Sea. And the Egyptian, they spell it P-U-N-T. for punt or PWEN, referenced by elders, comes from Babylon. Tablet meaning, so they have all of these different meanings of foot. The language in Nigeria derived from foot between Egypt and Ethiopian power. We find people called Petet by the Egyptian Nubians or Sudan. So all of these people go all the way down. I'm not just going to read all of them. There's a whole lot of them. And it winds up to being foot. And foot can be spelled Phut or Put. Okay. So when we talked about foot, it talks about that is where, and it's all over the place where you can connect the landmass. But they don't really talk about him because when you look up the information on him, he was never defeated. He was fearless. And that would be us, the Moors. We were fearless people. We fought hard. Our men were fearless. This is where they took the name Muslim came in, where they took the name Musselman and shortened it and called Muslim. So our men were built, stacked in muscles. And that's who we were. So we were warriors. We were fighters. And that's who we were. And so a lot of us still have that fighter mentality or spirit in us from foot. Okay. So now I'm going to go into real quickly. And the Moors are the Islamic practicing inhabitants of Al-Danunis, the Iberian Peninsula, including present-day Spain and Portugal, as well as Maghreb and Western Africa, whose culture described Moorish, meaning the practice of being a Moor. The word was also used in general in Europe to refer to anyone that was an original Arab or anyone who had African descent, sometimes called modern-day terms Black and Moors. Now, we know that they started using that term Black, but what I said in the very first segment is that the word Black is a brand new word. And if you go historically back, we never use the term Black for ourselves to identify ourselves. When it meant back in the term, it was saying we had burnt face. If you can translate the Hebraic text or Aramaic text, you'll never see the word Black in there. It was a brother who said he reads Hebrew and Arabic and all this stuff. Yeah, he was studying saying Black, 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 Black. And I'm like, no, brother, you're not the only one who can translate. Black is not what it's saying. It's saying burnt face, swarthy complexion does not mean black. One text says it blackeneth the sun. The word black was not even in existence at the time. It means darkened from the sun. So anything that said dark in modern language, they changed it to black to make us believe that that's our identification, and then start saying everything means black. Every word from Kush to Nubian, all that cannot mean black. It can't mean something that came into existence long after. We're ancient people. The term black, of a description for us, is a modern term. Now, was black always in existence? Of course, the color black has always been in existence. People paint black. This chair is black. I mean, they had the color black in existence. But for us coming to a people, we were never, ever called black until modern day civilization. And I think it was broadcast 2 or 3 when I went over the term black, and also where we came in to Africa and when we started using the word African American. But I also went into the old terms for Africa, the country Africa, the continent of Africa, where it is not Africa, it's brand new names. So we have all these new names. So now when we're calling people Africans and we're still misidentifying ancient people, even though it's a modern term. If you're going to go back to ancient times, you have to go back to the ancient word that was used during that particular time. Because when you're saying that people from Africa was like back in Africa in 400, and then you're saying they're Africans, Africa does not match because it was not called Africa at that time. I trust I'm making sense, and I'm trying to slow down because I be on a roll, and I'm trying to slow down a little bit. Okay. All right, so the term Moor, and so when we talk about the term Moor, and then we go into the word black, and one of the most interesting things about the word black, they say that black, the ancient term for black, means pale, right? It's pale, void of light, no complexion. So there's no way that the term was even meant for us, even when they modernized it, because we're definitely full of melon, we're not pale, and we're not void of light. So none of that connected to us at all. Okay. Okay. So the etymology of the word Moor, all right, and a lot of people say, well, Moor is a Greek word. So Moor is a Greek word and it comes from Greeks. And so you're still using the modern term. So as I stated earlier in this podcast, that we know that a lot of the language was translated from Aramaic language to Greek language before it went to Latin. So a lot of the terms that you see are Greek terms because those are the translations. Now, if you do not want to use the Greek terms, you're more than welcome to go back and use the ancient terms. And a lot of times when you're talking to people, sometimes they're going to be lost. So you have to explain that this is the ancient term and this is modernly used because the Greeks could not pronounce our language. So they had a very hard time. So they renamed everything and everybody changed all of the names around to suit their needs. And you have to think about if individuals are in power or a group of people are in power and they want to make things easier for them, they're going to change things to make it easier for them. They don't care anything about how it's going to affect you historically, economically. That's not their interest. Their interest is in making sure that they are comfortable with it. So that's what happened, and a lot of things got turned around and changed. All right. All right. So now we're going to go into the history of the Moors. And again, another spelling for Moor, I found so many different spellings, was the Moro. Also, just so you know. So we had Maur, Muar, Moro, and now Moor. So our the Moor itself was changed according to landmass, the people who were speaking the language. So now we talked about that when we got kicked out, and I want to go to this because this is so important. When the Moors were supposedly kicked out of Spain, the thing that most people miss is that Christianity was forced on the Moors. And what happened is Moors who converted became Moriscos. So they were forced into conversion and they were practicing Christianity. So they were called Moriscos. The Moors who decided that they were not going to accept that religion, accept that way of life, were thrown out of there. And this is where they were attacking them and tracking them down and all of that and killing them off because they did not want to convert to Christianity. So you had some Moors who stayed really tight, tough to their culture, their heritage. They were not going to change over. They did not want to practice the Christian faith or any of that. Long before the picture of the blonde hair, blue eye, Jesus came on board. This is long before. All right. And so then I want to go over just a few other things about some of the Moors that we know historically. And when we talk about our history, legacy, we only have the legacy of when they talked about Estefano the Moor. We talk about the chieftain that was the Moor. We talk about him. We talk about, all different people who literally St. Maurice the Moor, these type people, Alessandro de Medici the Moor. We talk about those people. And those are people that are ancient Moors that we know that were Moors. But when we go back to those Moors, I do not see any of them really representing the Moor, the Fez, the custom clothing. A lot of them were actually Moors who really, I don't know, I guess didn't really practice their culture or dress, or a lot of the ones that depict now, they got one picture of a Moor that they say was a Moor, and he doesn't look anything like a Moor. So again, they try to water us down to make us believe that we look like something else. They chopped off our noses on a lot of the statues, chopped off our noses so that you couldn't tell that we have this distinct nose. And I know people say, oh, your nose is small or whatever, but I still have an Asiatic nose. You know, it may not be as big and beautiful as some of you all, but I still do have an Asiatic nose. And they would do things like that, cut our noses off so we couldn't identify ourselves, you know, just try to change and rewrite history. And we already know that they turned the landmass around. We already know that they messed with the maps. We know that they did all these things. But you have to ask yourself, why are a people so desperate to get rid of you that they did everything to hide your identification? What is it about you that they needed to try to erase you totally from history and take on your history as their own history and make you want to believe that historically? Because we know that they stole everything and put their name on it. They're still doing that today. That's nothing new. They have not changed it. We know that they changed the landmass around in different territories so that you couldn't find yourself and make you think you came away from somewhere else. And I have a question. So I started doing some research about the great transatlantic slave trade, because a lot of the records that they claim that they have, they say that the slave trade, they're trying to say, came over off the waters, and that's just not true. But a lot of it, I'm looking into the actual information. They're supposed to have a lot of historical documents of like those who kept records of the, you know, the Moors, the Asiatics that came over here, and the ones that were already here. Well, we know that we were already here. We know that most of us were already here. So what records are they actually talking about? So some of the records that I did find show that certain families, that the person who had them captured kept records of the mother, the father, and the children that were being born. Some of them kept pretty good records. They even kept records on when they sold off some of the children to other plantation owners. So at least with some of those records, if you want to look for your family or try to trace yourself back, those records that were kept like that are pretty good, if they be truthful, are pretty good, because now you can trace some of your family back to where they were lost. So for instance, when that child got taken away from the parent, they'll actually, some of those records were really pretty decent. I don't know if any of you all had the opportunity to look at some of those records, and you can request online to look at the records. Like you have to give them a time frame of what time you're looking through, and you can kind of look through some of those old records. Or you can go to, I would say that the place that Taj and I went to was in Washington, D.C. So the library in Washington, D.C., I can't recall off the top of my head what the name of that library was. We actually was able to see a lot of information on microfiche and things like that. You can actually now go online and get a lot of that information. So we can kind of trace ourselves back to try to find some of our family members that was lost, if you're having the interest to do so. Because again, did not the people have a name and a land and a religion, a God? Like you brought these people over here, you claim to brought them over here, and then only birth that you have for them starts at the time of slavery, which again, that means we're captive in our own land. So remember that. So I'm trying to get away from the term slavery, because we know that slavery is taking people and keeping them captive and not allowing them to go. But because we were more in our own land, so we were, strangers in our own land, because we were moved around, so we couldn't identify ourselves. And so I like that term a lot more. It doesn't take away from the significance of what we've been through, by no means. It just makes me feel more secure knowing that I'm in my own land and I got to refine myself. I got to look around to see who I am and who my brothers and sisters are, my family members, because I do not know, because, we are finding each other slowly. But that's why the prophet told us you find your relation in Islam, because it's so hard to go back to tracing the time frame and we're speaking of. Very difficult to do that. So we have to find our relations here, like people that you get close to, people that you can vibrate with, because I know that a lot of people say, oh, all those bays, all those eels, all those alis, that's all you all have. And they think it's better to have names that don't associate with us. So they better say, well, at least we have different names. But then if you're looking and you have Johnson as a last name, then there's a whole bunch of Johnsons. So if you have a common name, it's so hard, because I don't use these European names, but let me just think of a European common name that they use all the time. Megan is a big European common name. So if you have Megan Johnson, and you can have a Megan Johnson that's on the Europeans, you have a Megan Johnson that's Asiatic. So now you still have the same name as someone else. You see how that doesn't make sense? So you criticize the prophet for giving us Bay, Ali, and Il, which is our 3 tribal names, before we were captured in our own land. Why do you think that your name is any better? Because you're named after someone else. So Megan Johnson, it'd be a whole lot of Megan Johnsons, or Joanne Brown, a whole lot of those different names, but they belong to someone else. So now you have an Asiatic with the name, and you have a European with the name. So you're having someone else's name. I'd rather have the name Bay, Ali, Il. I know who I'm talking to. And I never forget, when I was younger, there was a man, some of you all from my age probably remember Richard Bay. He was a talk show host. I never forget it. People tried to rag on me when I was younger about Richard Bay. He's a European. That's not an Asiatic name. And I had to break it down to him. The Turks who amalgamated, they use the last name Bay. A lot of so-called Turks or Turkish people use the last name Bay. So I had to let them see that you couldn't make me feel bad about my name in a European had it because of amalgamation. So yes, you're going to have some Bays. There's a lot of amalgamation amongst the Moorish community. And a lot of them say, oh, that started with Othello. It didn't start with Othello, but they used that story of Othello from being enamored with some European of ivory, white skin or whatever, trying to, put us down, and her skin's supposed to be so much better, and he was in love with her and all with that to death, and make us feel bad about who we are. And that'll never happen. Not for me. It may be for someone else. But we have to learn how to self-identify, how to self-qualify, how to bring ourselves back into the fold where we're proud of ourselves again. We think about ourselves again. We know who we are, and we're proud of it. And stop letting someone else try to turn us around to believe something else. Okay. So I wanted to go a little bit into this book about the Moor and foot. So, and listen, if you have your pencil and paper out, foot is spelled P-H-U-T, and we know that the P-H makes an F sound. And some pronounce it. I was talking to an elder who's a scholar. He's been studying for so many years. Oh my goodness. What happened is he was went over to the different countries, just to make a long story short, and he was studying Islam. And he was trying to find out the culture of Islam, where it all began, how did, as melanated individuals, that we fit in, Asiatics. And this is when he ran into finding out that he was doing his research, that he was a Moor. So when he did, he came back, and I guess someone had gave him my name. I'm not sure who it was, but that he knew him. and him and I started conversating, and he was telling me all the wonderful things, about being a Moor, and excited about that I had wrote about foot, because he was saying that a lot of people did not even know he existed. And so PHUT or PUT. All right. Okay. All right. I want to try to follow my diagram. Like I said, I started making notes for myself so I could stay on track with all the things that I wanted to talk about today with you all. All right. Okay. And so, all right. So the last thing I want to talk about today is identity and historical narratives. So I know every week I come on this call every Thursday and I talk to you all about self-identification, nationality, and birthrights, and I can constantly go over the records that help us see, the records that actually help us see who we are and how to enforce it. Now, the prior week, I did ask Moors if you could find an elder Moor, and I'm not sure if any of you all did the exercise that I asked. If you could find an elder Moor to talk to about nationality and birthrights. The prior week, I asked you all to find a Moor in your family with the birth certificates. And I wanted you all to compare birth records to see what they put on birth records modern days and what they had on birth records in previous times. And we did discuss that you can have a mother who's maternal can have 5 children, and all 5 children can have something different. If you have a birth record from this government, it'll have something different on there. Even though it doesn't matter, again, I said about the father, it's the mother's maternal. So that's who you would go by. The mother bloodline is maternal. And so all of these children from the same vessel cannot be something different. Again, it's the mother is maternal. And so if all of us came from the same mother, then our birth record should read the exact same thing. And that is not happening. So I don't know if some of you all did that. I was really looking for it in the email for some of you all to email me what you found on the birth record. So for some of you all who are new here today, if you could please look at that exercise and do that, because this is very important on how they try to bury who we are. So it's very, very important that we do some of these exercises just to get a feel for it. And you would, gasp for air when you look at all these birth records and then all of these different classifications. I'll put it on the birth record. Then the next one I wanted you all to do was to speak with an elder, because I talked to you about the brother who was a dear associate of mine who literally was not able to really practice more science until his mother transitioned. And we know the importance of mother, the one who has given us a sustainer of life. And so he really wanted to make sure that his mother was not uncomfortable with his life choices. And that put him in turmoil. So I asked you all if you could find an elder to talk to about more science. It doesn't matter if they agree or disagree, just to get the perspective of what it would be like to talk to an elder about nationality and birthrights and get their response. Because listen, I did it because when he was saying the problem that he was having, I wanted to talk to elders because I grew up around elders. So I want to clarify, I grew up around elders, but they knew who they were. But these were, elders who did not know who they were. And I wanted to have the conversation with them and find out what exactly their mindset was. And I'll tell you, one of them was a brother and one was a sister. And so the brother was easier to talk to about nationality and birthrights than the sister was. So they were husband and wife. And I wanted to talk to them both about the importance of nationality, because remember, they coming up in the era elder than myself, and they were elder to me. So I'm an elder. So they weren't they were like a great grandparent. And that's the time frame that I wanted to go in. You can go to grandparent or great grandparent, whoever, just to have the conversation. But I wanted to see what the mindset of the individuals were. And so the man was easier to talk to about nationality and birthrights, and he would ask a lot of questions. And so, but the wife kept saying she kept identifying with her religious denomination as a nationality. And she didn't see the importance of it because she said, well, I'm a Baptist. And so because I'm a Baptist, that's what I am. I'm a Baptist, so it doesn't matter. I'm a colored Baptist. And so then the thing for the husband, and I remember him kept using the word Negro. And I asked him, I said, well, why do your wife uses colored and you use Negro? And he said, well, I'm 10 years older than her. And in my time frame, we use Negro and we is accepting of that. In her time frame, they use colored. So I said, well, if I can prove to you all that you're none of these things, would you hear me out? And they heard me out. So he listened intently. He listened and he said, well, I don't know if my wife is going to go for it. And I said, but I can understand why you would say that we're not, black or colored or anything like that. He said, but the interesting thing he said I found out is that Negro and black mean the same thing. He said, I had no idea that they even was associated in the same category. And then he said, you made me laugh when you talked about Crayola crayon box. Today we do colored pencils, but the Crayola crayon box, and you can't find your complexion in there. And it was funny because when I was talking to him, he kept taking this brown crayon out of the box. It was a brown crayon. It was another crayon. It was like a rust color crayon. And he kept putting them on paper and putting his hand up to the paper, trying to match his complexion. And he said, you're right. I can't even match my complexion as this. So how do they get cartoons that look like us? I said, look at those cartoons. Do those cartoons really resemble your complexion? If you take a really good look at the cartoon. And so that more intrigued him than anything because he wasn't able to find himself in the crayon box. And so he realized that he wasn't colored. The wife was stuck on, I'm a Baptist, everything was I'm a Baptist. And when I tried to talk to her about, nationality, the importance of nationhood and why Baptist could not be her nationality, she heard me, but then she said to me, this is the only thing that I know. My mother taught it to me. I taught it to my children. She said, so this is the only thing I know. She said, so if I give this up, then I don't have anything. I don't know anything because it's the only thing that I know. And I told her, just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And every time you think about who you are, think about that you are nothing that deludes to slavery and that you have a nationality and a birthright. And at least you know that before you transition. And I remember a good friend of mine said to me, think about it. I could have left this earth and never knew who I was. And so that's why it's really important for us to talk to our elders. So even if they do not want to change over or conform, at least they heard what you had to say. At least for food for thought in their mind, they'll know that they have a choice, that they'll know that they wasn't a Negro or a colored folk or a black person or African American when they leave here. At least they have the opportunity to know that they could make a choice even in their elder years. Even if it's something they decide that's not for them, at least they have been informed to make an informed decision for themselves. And listen, nothing's greater than information. Nothing's greater than having information that allows me to make a choice about who I am. It's very, very important. All right, so I have just a few minutes, and I want to close out in just a few moments. And I want to first thank everyone for being here with me today on Real Morse Talk. And I trust you found something interesting that you found today in today's topics, and I really wanted to make sure that I was able to address comments. So if you have a comment that you make, I will address it if I feel like it's a comment that, I can address. And it's really, really important that we know that these comments that we're making are addressed. I don't want people to think they're watching me and I'm not going to take the time to read their comment or even address their comment, because we're not on some live talk show where you can call me in and ask me questions. You would have to actually leave it in the chat if you have a question for me so that I can actually answer it. And for that, that would make me very, very happy to be able to answer any question that you have. All right. All right, so before we close tonight, I want to leave everyone with something important. Real Morse Talk is not about arguments. It is about research. When we hear statements, comments, or challenges, we do not run from them. We slow the conversation down and ask the responsible questions. Where did this information come from? What historical documentation support it? And can it be verified? That is how truth is approached. History must be studied through records, archives, manuscripts, and document scholarship, along with oral translation or oral history. When people do what works for them, they begin to see their history, their legacy with greater clarity. So tonight, I encourage everyone listening, do not take anyone's word for it, including mine. Research it for yourself. That's so important to me. And listen, if you find something different than what I have and we can add to the conversation, please let me know. Again, this topic is called Real Morse Talks. This is about Morse having actual conversations, but I just don't want to have conversation about the work the prophet did for us, because through his work is how I'm able to come to you with the information that I have. Through his work is how I know who I am today by nationality and birthright. Who I am and knowing you and connecting with you is all because the prophet took the time to make that call. Come all ye agents of America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights, because you are not Negroes. Learn of your forefathers' ancient and divine creed, right? We are trying to uplift fallen humanity here. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. And I want to go ahead and put up again, if you'd like to donate to our online schooling, you can go to online $online schooling MC. If you'd like to donate to our humanitarian organization, you can go to $Doors of Drew Ali. If you'd like to purchase any books of any kind, you can go to circle7publishing.com. And if you'd like to donate, you can go to More Science with GSKS.com. So we have different ways that you can help us help you. It has been my absolute pleasure to be with you here tonight. I am Prime Minister National Grand Sheikh Daria Bay. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Assalamu alaikum, Wars.